Hello, everyone. Welcome to the second day of the Connecticut Affordable Housing Conference. We're so grateful that you've chosen to be here this afternoon, share the past couple days with us to learn more about housing in your state and how we can make it better for everyone. My name is Alicia Gardner. I'm a senior policy analyst with the Partnership for Strong Communities, and I'm joined by Amy Peltier, who will be moderating our panel later, who is the Policy and Advocacy Director here at the partnership. We're really excited about our session today, Fair Rent Commissions in Small Towns. It is especially timely given the special legislation from last week that has really changed the game for fair rent commissions in the state. So we'll go more into that. Just as a thank you, we're very grateful for the National Equity Fund as our sponsor for making this session and this whole conference free for anyone to attend. We know it's such a great resource, especially for up-and-coming professionals, for staff of small municipalities to be able to attend without having the conference fees. So we're very appreciative of them and all of our other sponsors that contribute to this conference. To give you a quick overview, I will be kicking off and talking a little bit about fair rent commissions and giving an introduction to what they are, how they operate, and giving an overview of the special session legislation and how that's changed fair rent commissions in the state going forward. After my introduction, I'll turn the time over to Amy Peltier, who will introduce our panelists, who all work with various small town fair rent commissions in some capacity. And after a lively panel debate in which you're welcome to drop questions in the chat for them to answer, we'll close off with representatives from our state Fair Rent Commission network to talk about the resources and support that exist. So a lot for not a lot of time. Again, thank you so much for coming, and we'll kick things off. So for those of you who may not be as familiar, what are fair rent commissions? Fair rent commissions are municipal boards with the primary power to restrict rental charges in residential housing. That is, according to the legal statute, rent that is so excessive as to be harsh and unconscionable. That's the standard. This commission holds hearings in response to tenant complaints in the same way that other municipal boards do. There are no rent control laws in Connecticut, and fair rent commissions are not rent control or rent caps. Instead, they're what one commissioner called the conscience of the community. I really love that, so I'm going to borrow that phrase. Instead of a law that says you can or can't raise the rent this much, it's a volunteer board of community members hearing about complaints from other community members and what's going on with their rental housing. And they have the option to hear the story, hear what's going on, and make a decision on behalf of their community whether this rent is according to common sense, fair and equitable, or harsh and unconscionable. Some of the rulings that they'll make are rent increases are reduced or denied. The landlord may be required to phase in the rent increase. The rent increase may be delayed until the landlord has brought the apartment up to health and safety standards or completed required maintenance requests, or the tenant's claim can be denied. Fair rent commissions have existed in Connecticut back as far as the 1980s. They've been around for a really long time. But in the past 3 years, the number of fair rent commissions in Connecticut have doubled. This is in part because of state legislation requiring it for towns above 25,000, but also because housing has just become such a hot button issue. Rents have increased so much that towns with previously dormant fair rent commissions have been reviving them in response to the housing crisis. What criteria do the fair rent commissions use to make their decision? There's a list of 13 criteria in the law that have to be considered, but the overarching standard is whether the rent increase is fair and equitable. And these criteria can generally be summarized in these 6 points: the size and history of rent increases, the condition of the premises, including whether it's substandard, the landlord operating costs, which might include maintenance or taxes, facilities and services included in the rent, comparable rents in the neighborhood and the municipality, and the income of the tenant and the availability of places to which the tenant can afford to move. Now, as we discuss fair rent commissions, what they can or can't do, I want to draw your attention to a really important nuance. Is that fair rent commissions do protect against rent increases, but not evictions without cause. As you'll hear discussed later in East Lyme, there was a sad story where an out-of-state landlord or a big kind of landlord company came, bought up an apartment complex, and overnight sent these crazy rent increases to the residents. And again, you'll hear more about this inspiring story. They're able to put together a fair rent commission and protect themselves from these rent increases and stay in their homes. A couple years later, the same management company did the same thing in another town, bought up the apartment, but instead of putting rent increases out, they just put eviction notices out. And fair rent commissions cannot protect against these eviction notices. So just want to draw your attention that although they at first seem unrelated, the fair rent commissions and the just cause eviction protections really work hand in hand to protect tenants in Connecticut, but only one of them has so far had the support of the Connecticut legislature. All right, on to fair rent commissions in Connecticut. There are 54 towns with fair rent commissions, so almost one in every three. As they're the larger towns, this means that about 80% of all of Connecticut's population is protected by a fair rent commission. However, there's still a sizable minority that's left unprotected based solely on their geography. There are over 75,000 Connecticut renter families in the grayed out areas that are currently unprotected. But we had a special session. So, as of last Thursday, when the Connecticut General Assembly passed House Bill 8002, there's currently a new law that all towns greater than 15,000 population must have a fair rent commission. So, you can see that would include all of those little towns in orange and listed on this side. That will be another, ooh, 20 about 1920 towns that will be added, um, which is fantastic. And just wanted to draw attention that even prior to the passing of HB 8002, there were 9 towns with populations below the 25,000 threshold that had opted in to creating their own fair rent commission. And even now, with this new 15,000 threshold, there are still 3 towns that are Clinton, Killingworth, and Westbrook. They're a trio on southeastern Connecticut coastline who, again, just created fair rent commissions even though they weren't compelled to. Um, there are also new modifications, which we'll hear from our panelists a little bit more, that if you don't feel like the town has the capacity to create its own fair rent commission, it can create a joint fair rent commission with a neighboring municipality, or the Regional Council of Government can establish a regional fair rent commission that any town within the planning region can then join. And again, this isn't required for any town, and it's also not, you don't have to have only 15,000. Like a smaller town that sees its regional fair rent commission is creating one could opt in regardless of population threshold. One thing I think is really cool is that for the regional fair rent commissions, they're required to have virtual hearings upon request. So if there's a distance issue with getting to these public hearings, they're trying to mitigate some of that proactively. And before we turn things over, I just want to raise right off, there are 2 of the most frequent concerns that we hear when we discuss fair rent commissions in smaller towns. One is the capacity of the small towns to staff and run a fair rent commission, and other is that, we just don't need them in small towns because we don't have renters. And speaking to the second one first, there is actually really good data that every single town in Connecticut does have renters. And every new town that's come up in the HB 8002 has at least 500 renter households that are now going to be protected by this. And a town's population size isn't necessarily correlated with the number of renters it has. A really good example is Ansonia, which is newly required in the next 2 years to create a fair rent commission. It has a population of 18,900, but its town is 41% renters. So none of them had protections before. They will now. And on the capacity of small towns, this is a very real concern that we see the legislature has made a lot of effort to come up with pathways to provide protections for residents by creating these joint Fair Rent Commission or regional Fair Rent Commission options. There are also free resources for towns looking to do their own. There are model ordinances, so you don't have to work out like copying your own code that you can work with. There's a toolkit that's pretty extensive. There's free training, and there's the Fair Rent Commission Network, which provides peer-to-peer learning and free training for staff and commissioners to learn how to kind of get this off the ground. So small towns aren't in it all by themselves. But thank you for this primer, and I'd like to turn the time over to Amy to introduce our panelists. You're on mute, Amy.
Thank you so much, Alicia. It's my pleasure to be here with you today, and I'm really excited to introduce our panelists to you and to hear from them because they're all coming at this from a place of personal experience in this work and really being leaders in their community. So first, and I'm hoping you all will come off we'll turn your screens on as I introduce you, but we will have Yamila Mateo. She is the Neighborhood Coordinator, Eviction, Fair Housing, and Relocation Officer, and Fair Rent Commission Administrator in the City of New London. So Yamila is busy. We have Beth Sibilia. She is the Director for the Center for Housing Opportunity in Eastern Connecticut and will be speaking with us about the East Lyme Fair Rent Commission. We have Miss India Rogers, who is the Director of Operations and Communications for the town of Bloomfield, and she is their Fair Rent Commission Administrator. And then we will also be joined by Elizabeth Sanderson, who is the Grants Coordinator and Principal Program Manager at the Capital Region Conference of Government, so the CROG, and I'm so excited to bring her into this conversation to really start talking about that regional perspective on fair rent commissions. So looks like we're still working on getting people up. Let's see here. Can you hear me any better? Okay, great. So Yamila, starting with you, can you tell us a little bit about what has been the value of a fair rent commission in your town, and maybe just explain around what the population is in your town and the value that the fair rent commission has brought to your work?
Yes. Thank you for having me today. I'm so glad to represent the city of New London. Hello, my neighbors, residents of Connecticut and beyond. Um, so New London is about 30,000 residents overall. So we are a small, medium town city. Um, but I think I wish growing up as a daughter of bilingual speakers, right? My parents didn't know what housing looked like, right? So I think from a personal level, I've seen the value of families being restored when it comes to housing, but then also it creates accessible forum for resolution because the Fair Rent Commission should and is a neutral party for tenants and landlords. Um, I think too, it's less intimidating before going to court or directly to court when it comes to disputes for landlords and tenants. And I think too, here in New London, we've seen the Fair Rent Commission prevent unnecessary evictions, homelessness. We get to mediate disputes. Most of our disputes or complaint forms actually do not go to a hearing. They do resolve in mediation because we have wonderful mediators, Sarah Gager and Matthew Green. But I think I've seen the Fair Rent Commission really house and keep families housed. And I would say too, lastly, it also creates here in New London local accountability. I think, especially within housing, I think neighborhood enhancement, fair housing laws, evictions, relocations, it's really burdensome, right? And if you don't have commission members who are passionate, I know our chairperson Al Kinzel is super passionate about our Fair Rent Commission, but I think you have local buy-in. These are landlords and tenants who actually volunteer their time, right? Twice, three times a month. Um, so I think it just creates this local accountability like never before on housing.
Thank you so much. And I appreciate your passion for the work as well. I'd love to get some perspective from India. Coming from Bloomfield, your Fair Rent Commission was started without having the state mandate. And I think that would have changed based on the new housing bill that was passed last week. But prior to that, can you talk a little bit about working with the Fair Rent Commission in a smaller town? And what is one thing that you would like people to know about a small town Fair Rent Commission? And maybe some myths that you've encountered kind of getting a small town Fair Rent Commission off the ground?
Well, thank you, Amy. Thank you for having me today. Coming from the town of Bloomfield, hello to all of our neighbors as well, and to the state of Connecticut. Our Fair and Commission was established back in 1982, so well over 40 years ago. As of recently of last year, we changed our ordinance to include a landlord and a tenant, and I felt that it was important to do that to have more of a wide range of perspectives regarding our hearings and our reviews that we have with our tenants and landlords in the community. Some of the myths that I see when we have our cases, people feel as though that we can have the ability to set the rents, we have the ability to override leases, and we can make broader legal decisions, but we know that's a quasi judicial board and we don't have that. Recently, I attended the mediation training that the Connecticut Statewide Fair Rent Network had. As a board member, I received a lot of information that I would love to bring to the town because as of right now, we don't have a mediation formalized process. And I think if we did, we could minimize the cases that go directly to hearing. A lot of our tenants feel as though when they get to a formal hearing, there's a sense of a retaliation that may come back on them. So we wanted to eliminate that by possibly having a mediation process developed here in the town. And I'm looking forward to talking with Elizabeth more in the coming weeks through CROG to see if that's a regional effort that they will be willing to support us with because we don't have the internal resources or staffing to get that off the ground right now.
Wow, that's great. I like that connection, thinking about the regional resources. So we heard from Yamila that a lot of these challenges would sometimes be solved in negotiations, and then there's this other step of mediations that you're looking to bring things to, and then there's this additional step of a hearing. Turning to you, Beth, you were instrumental in getting the East Lyme Fair Rent Commission up and running, and that was an incredible success, especially since I know it happened very quickly. What are some of the other successes East Lyme has seen, or other Fair Rent Commissions in the region where you're working seen recently? What are some of the trends and successes that you're seeing?
Yeah, no, I appreciate it, Amy. Hi, everybody. Beth Sibilia, the director of the Center for Housing Opportunity in Eastern Connecticut. We cover New London, Wyndham, and Tolland counties, so the eastern third of the state. I firstly want to be clear that the Fair Rent Commission was created in East Lyme because the residents demanded it. It's not because we helped them. It's not because we gave them testimony guides. It's because they demanded it. It wasn't convenient for the town. It wasn't necessarily something that was politically popular, but because the tenants and the leaders held their elected officials to account, it was what I refer to as a municipal miracle. We had a fair rent commission established in the town of East Lyme within 8 weeks of notices of 70, 80, 90% rental increases. So I just want to say it was their advocacy that produced the Fair Rent Commission. So that's part of it, right? Make sure that you put your residents in every community up front. They're the ones fighting for their community, so they're the ones that should be upfront advocating for it. We have seen some early resolutions. Unfortunately, in East Lyme, we are dealing with a what we consider a small landlord. It owns 400 units, and that landlord continues to push back against those tenants. For instance, after Fair Rent Commission hearings, tenants have been told that they were going to become month-to-month tenants. Their leases were not going to be renewed. Rental increases of 20% were arbitrarily thrown out. So many of these tenants are now on month-to-month or tenancies at will because they're not obtaining leases from this landlord, which led them to create the now it's called Bay Point. We called it Windward Village then. Bay Point Tenants Union, the first tenants union in East Lyme, first one in suburban Connecticut here. And that generated discussion in the region about what's possible for tenants. So lo and behold, the same landlord came and purchased 6 more units in the city of New London. Jamila's well aware of it, and proceeded a week later to issue 14 notices to quit. So despite the fact that New London has a great fair rent commission that has early conflict resolution, improve access for renters, strengthen relationships right between these tenants and the city, and possibly their landlord if they mediate it. Despite all of that, the tenants still have to continually advocate for themselves because there are limits to what a fair rent commission can do. So we're really excited to announce recently that New London tenants in those 4 buildings have created their own unions. So now there is one Alpha Capital tenants union that exists in East Lyme and New London. So a suburban urban relationship, and it has 5 separate chapters. So what we've seen is an increase of advocacy amongst these residents in East Lyme. We've also seen an increase in advocacy for elected officials saying, hey, wait a minute, this isn't right. It may be legal, but it certainly isn't right. So having that partnership from policymakers has been crucial, not only in establishing the Fair Rent Commission, as I explained in East Lyme, but standing shoulder to shoulder with tenants and saying this is not acceptable in our community. So seeing that relationship grow has been terrific. And then finally, to see neighbors with really different backgrounds across all sorts of differences, reaching out to each other and saying, hey, I got you. I'll be here for you. We'll help you. That has been, just an incredible thing to see. And every time we get together with the tenants from New London and East Lyme, it brings, I don't mean to be corny, but it literally brings tears to my eyes to see this type of relationship across the region. And I'm excited to see, this spread to the smaller communities where we're going to see increased fair rent commissions, 5 more in New London County, 2 more in Windham County, and 1 in Tallinn County. So we're very, very excited to see that happen and see these relationships grow from that.
That's great. I love to hear about the community capital that kind of comes together as a result of something like a fair rent commission. And to Yamila's point earlier, these are people volunteering their time and stepping up. And I just want to highlight something you said that I think is really important is that this is just one, fair rent commissions are one piece of tenant stability. And paired with something like a tenants union, and to Alicia's point in her opening paragraph, paired with another tool like just cause evictions, like this is where we can find more tenant stability, affordability for tenants, and keeping them housed. Never mind just opening up opportunities for everyone, but keeping people stably housed where they're at. And there are many tools in this toolkit for tenants, and we need to be able to, this growing opportunity for having it codified in state statute is huge. But the more of these communities that can do this together will really help kind of that that stability grow, which I think is also a really nice transition into hearing from Elizabeth, who is coming at this from a unique lens, and I think a really exciting opportunity, especially as the result of the passing of H 8002 last week, and the opportunity for regional fair rent commissions. And so I know Elizabeth's got a couple slides that we're going to pull up that she can share here, but bringing you into the conversation, Elizabeth, can you share with us how your work at CROG is thinking about fair rent commissions and how you see the COG role in improving the effectiveness of fair rent commissions with a more regional approach?
Sure, and thank you all so much for inviting me into this conversation, and my fellow Kroger, India on the call too. I'm looking forward to connecting with your ideas. I am not as brought into the Fair Rent Commission conversation as my colleagues on the call here, but I did want to give you know, an overview of the work we're doing at CROG now. Can you see my screen? Is it a mess of?
Not yet.
Okay. Okay. I think I've got it.
Yes, I think it's gonna, yep, we've got it.
Great. So just put together some slides because I know not everybody's familiar with what a COG is. So just wanted to start there with we actually at CROG have a social media campaign called CROG What to help people understand what COGs do. So CROG is just one of 9, and it's CROG is a regional council of government in the state, and we're one of 9 planning regions in Connecticut. And ours is the pink area here, CROG, includes Hartford and 37 municipalities in that area for the CROG region. And the COGs were developed, municipalities within each of the planning region voluntarily created this council of governments. So our whole purpose as COGs is to carry out regional planning and other activities on behalf of the member municipalities. And we jointly address common interests and coordinate these interests with state plans and programs. So we're well positioned to take on the new legislation that was hopefully going to be signed into and the bill signed soon. So to take on the role of providing regional fair rent commissions so that we can support some of these smaller towns that don't have fair rent commissions, or some of the towns that are looking to you know, convert to a joint or regional model for the program. So this is an analysis of maps showing in blue are the towns that are currently required to have fair rent commissions, and that's with populations of 25,000 or more. So we also showed the towns that have fair rent commissions but are not required. So those are that crosshatch. So we actually have 3 towns that aren't required to have commissions but are providing them anyway. And I think that's a good model, and to, you know, fair to say this is who we are targeting to we did a survey of our resident, or not the resident, I'm sorry, the municipal, the people who run and operate the fair rent commissions in their towns. And we asked them for some of the common concerns that they're hearing, as well as if they would be interested in the regional or shared fair rent commission model. So we found that there were 21 towns that did respond to the survey, and that 16 were interested. So This again is a map showing the towns that have fair rent commissions, as well as in yellow, the towns that would be required to provide the fair rent commissions under the new legislation. So there's going to be 8 more towns in the region that are going to need to provide fair rent commissions. 5 of them do not currently have fair rent commissions, and this is consistent with the map that Alicia had shared at the beginning. So we're looking forward to filling some gaps and needs in the region, and wanted to share this slide. This is showing the towns in the CROG region that responded to our survey, 21 of our 38 towns, and just giving a visual of where those towns are in the state. And this squiggly line is the Connecticut River here, if you can see on the map, but might be tough to see. So of the towns that were surveyed, highlighted in yellow are those that are interested in participating in a shared or regional model. And 7 do not currently have fair rent commissions. So, and 3 are interested in participating in a fair rent commission, even though they're below the 15,000 population, which I think goes in line with what the other speakers were saying about the need for fair housing, you know, the importance of that. So we found of those towns that are interested, they're at a varieties, right? So 6 currently required to have fair rent commissions already have one. 3 are not currently required to have fair rent commissions, but will be required to with the new law, but they already have one. And then 4 that do not have fair rent commissions, but will be required to with the new law. So there's a variety. I guess that's just, you know, there's a variety of people with different circumstances that either they don't already have a setup or not. We haven't heard from Hartford and New Britain, but we did hear from some of the other larger towns that have commissions, and some of they're already happy with the setup that they have. So we're looking to target our services to the towns that want or need them, and supporting the towns that have their own commissions already in other ways, like as India mentioned, an opportunity to collaborate. So just a brief overview of the key findings of our survey. Quorum is persistent challenges. So having a regional commission will help, you know, could help solve that by having fewer commissioners in the region. You get more engaged commissioners and attending when the monthly meetings, or however often it's determined that the meetings need to be. But helping with cases, complex cases, mediation services. We've talked about staff training, optimizing the fair rent network that's been established, and the resources that are already available there. So legal services, that's a common cost driver, and how thinking about ways that we can create economies of scale with some of these common concerns that we're hearing about, you know, help that are barriers to operating successful fair rent commissions. So and that's what we're really excited to help in this space. This is just some more stats about the survey, which we don't have to get into too much, but just thought it would be interesting to share some of the information we learned from the survey, and then how we're going to be interested in, or how we're going to be looking to applying that information. And then my contact information here, because we are going to be starting up those conversation. We have a meeting planned December 9th with the representatives from municipalities that are interested in participating in the Regional Fair Rent Commission. So if anyone on the call is interested to learning if your municipality is already attending that meeting, feel free to reach out, or contact your municipality directly too if you are interested to participate in CROG's efforts to regionalize that service. So I will stop sharing, but thank you so much for letting me give a little background primer on what COGs are and sharing a little bit about what we see in our region.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. I'm just gonna draw attention to Beth's point here in the chat, and maybe a downside, but also maybe an opportunity to think about. Beth kind of mentioned the kind of local connections of people coming together in their own communities. And that's probably going to be a bit of a bigger challenge when you're bringing in a more regional approach, but maybe that's an opportunity to kind of think through how to still try and create those community connections so that that kind of human capital can continue to grow, and there's kind of a growing understanding and a growing advocacy around tenant stability overall. So that's something to keep in mind, I think, from, and that's the great part of having a conversation like this. I think each town and each Fair Rent Commission is really different, and there's so much opportunity to learn from one another in kind of how you go through in starting these, but also like implementing your own policies and procedures for each Fair Rent Commission. And that's kind of the question I wanted to turn to next, and I'm going to maybe point to you, India, and Yamila, and you can kind of tag team on the question. I'm trying to see, what's the difference between a larger fair rent commission and a small fair rent commission, and how, if I live in a small town, how would it be any different, maybe than from a large town to get involved with my fair rent commission, either as maybe I want to be a commissioner, or maybe, I'm in a small town and I have a fair rent. I have a complaint that I want to bring to you about my rent going up. Maybe starting with you, India, how would I do that, in your community, and how might it be different from a larger town?
Well, in our town, I'm luckily to be also the director of communications here in the town. So I promote through our website opportunities of vacancies that may be on our boards. Right now, we're full. I'm looking to have those positions be reappointed in the near future. But also, I feel like within smaller towns, there's more of a community connection. And to Beth's point, not getting them lost in the sauce when it comes to other resources that may be available, like through social services, for possible rental assistance if it gets to that point, senior services, and we also include our health and building department. So we have our own little nucleus of people that when we do receive a referral, that referral is sent out to those persons and to our town attorney to review. Right now, we don't have a mediation process, so I'm hoping to get that established. But in the meantime, the review is done to establish to see whether we do have a case to go to hearing, or can it be resolved between the tenant and the landlord. And we're looking forward to partnering up with other folk in the community who may want to be involved, inviting them out to the meeting, see what they're like, getting more information in our local publications, our newsletters, our electronic signboards, and just promoting it on our website.
And do you have something on your website if a tenant had a concern about a rent increase and they wanted to be in touch with, how did they get in touch with you? And
So we do have a dedicated webpage for our Fair Rent Commission. It outlines our complaint form. It talks about the 13 conditions. It talks about other resources that are locally here in the town as well as regionally. And we have contact information who when Lynn Weissel, who's our recording secretary for our commission here in Bloomfield, reaches out with a lot of information to those persons who are interested in filing a complaint.
Oh, wow, that's great. Looking now to you, Yamila, where, if someone wanted to file a complaint or had concerns about a rent increase, how would they do that with your
Yes,
commission?
yes, yes. So here in New London, anyone who has a Fair Rent Commission complaint, they could come to City Hall. We're on the second floor of New London, 181 State Street, Connecticut. And I've actually thought about this, right? How do we create more access, especially for seniors who are homebound, right? And the other side of that as well is most of our residents here in New London, we are a tight-knit community. So a lot of it is word of mouth. Sometimes, we have communities, partners, but most of that information is through either social media. We have community partners. Um, and I think too, because I am one person doing five different roles, so evictions, relocations, fair housing, neighborhood enhancement, we do have, which the question is, right? How does a small community compared to a larger community, how do those fair rent commissions function? I think here in New London, because it's just myself doing all that admin work, um, I think, things can get a little bit slower simply due to the fact that we are short-staffed compared to our sister town or city, New Haven, right? Shout out Woodalise Bermudez. She is our chair for the Fair Rent Commission Network. So they have a whole department, right, for fair rent commissions. So I think just even capacity is very different. I think here in New London, because our capacity is different, our procedures have to be very clear. This is what we do. You have a complaint form. You could either, if you can't write. So yesterday I had a gentleman, he came to the office, didn't know how to read or write, and I just had him share, hey, okay, how do you feel about this? I would ask him the question, type it out for him. Right now it is electronic, but we do have a manual form available, and then I digitize it for the tenant. So we are accessible. I think it's key in order for fair rent commissions to be fair, right? It's a fair rent commission. So we want to create that accessibility.
And
Mhm.
your electronic complaint, is that available on a website like through the town of New London?
Yes. So we have something called Open Gov. If your city or town doesn't have Open Gov, please, I'm not sponsored, but please have Open Gov because we essentially only did manual. So it was a lot of scanning, and I still do that. But I think having everything electronically where the tenants can file and upload themselves any new items, any new documents, um, everything is digitized. So we use OpenGov, and they are really good with cities and towns. So I highly recommend them.
And when you say a tenant is uploading documents, these are maybe um, receipts of rent or things that you're saying would go to help to bolster their case or their cause that they're bringing a complaint about.
Yes, yes. So for example, the complaint. So there's two reasons why here in New London anyone can file a fair rent commission complaint, specifically tenants, code maintenance issues, or a rent increase. And we even have Section 8 folks who come in and say, hey, my rent is increasing, my income hasn't changed at all. What's happening? And most of the time, that's just mediation will recertify them and will help them in that area.
And that's a good point, right? Someone who may have a housing voucher, you're saying a fair rent commission is still available to them.
Correct.
That's
At
great.
least here in New London, but they
Yes,
should be statewide. Yes, it
yes,
should be.
yes.
Mhm.
Um, So just thinking about those two comparisons, I really appreciate how both of you are saying it's so important to be connected to community, but also community services and social services. Both of you serving as kind of administrators within your municipal structure. It sounds like you both have to wear a lot of hats. So, so that you are at your capacity, and maybe that's the benefit. And I look forward to talking about what the Fair Rent Commission Network really brings in terms of a benefit to being at that capacity. And I'm going to maybe pull Beth into the conversation a little bit now too. Participating in a conversation like this, or maybe with the network. And you mentioned, Yamila, someone coming in who is maybe illiterate and doesn't have the literacy skills. Are you aware of who are the types of folks that are most often served by your commission? Are they single people? Are they families? Is it really diverse? And I'm wondering if that's different again from a larger community and a smaller community, and even more from like a regional perspective, that Beth, you may hear about, or even Elizabeth in your beginning research, what you're hearing about. Who accesses fair rent commissions?
I'm going to kick this to Jamila because I'm going to say the City of New London is one of the Fair Rent Commissions that published an annual report as to the number of cases, the disposition. So I thought that was really um, a great exercise in transparency for something that people don't know a lot about, to say, here's our report. This is what we did. So Jamila, what do you have? I don't mean to put you on the spot, but you guys did a great report.
Thank you. I would say a lot of, at least here in New London, right? So we are very diverse. You see immigrants, you see natives, you see you name it, any background, we got it. So I do think a lot of the fair, just to summarize, a lot of the Fair Rent Commission, and Al Kinzel, our chairperson, really did that report, and he's been a great support for our commission. And I think that's another thing, being aware of who's on your commission is really key, because you don't just want anyone, right? You want people who are passionate, who want to be there. But we see a lot of seniors, a lot of folks over 62, single mothers. We see a lot of specifically families. So but most of those cases stop at mediation because, again, you're risking your family, right? I don't want to go to a hearing, have a commission decide what my fate will be. So I would say those are the big demographics that we see on a daily basis. And recently, we've been getting a lot of subsidized housing. That's really big because a lot of landlords are coming from out of town. And I'm sure in different cities here as well, you'll see the same thing where unfortunately people will buy out um, all of these properties and units. And now we have seniors or families on the street.
Are
I
you
will say, I'll
just,
just jump in and
go
tell
ahead,
you that
Beth.
each
Yeah.
time 100% of those cases have been people over 62. 100% of them.
Wow. India, any sense from you in Bloomfield, the folks that are more likely or have been accessing the Fair Rent Commission?
I agree with both Beth and Jamila. In our town, we are about 33% senior, 62 and over. So we've seen a big increase in that as well. We know that their incomes are not rising like you would be as a working professional. So it's very difficult for them to maintain the current rents that they have right now, let alone an increase of even $50 has been a struggle for a lot of people here in town. So we definitely try to resolve the cases as much as we can through fair rent. But speaking about community resources earlier, trying to give them some assistance, like maybe energy or some food assistance that would free up some money for them to pay rent until they're in a better situation, possibly to move forward if they choose to. Also, a lot of those cases we've had in the past with Section 8 vouchers as well, to the point where the threshold of payment for the month is less than what the rent is at a particular complex. So if your rent is $1,800, but your Section 8 voucher is only saying it's $1,500, that's where we get into the mix of a person possibly being evicted for non-payment of rent because the voucher doesn't meet the current rent that's been increased. So that's what we've seen here in Bloomfield. Well, not a lot, but more recent than in the past.
Okay, thank you all. Oh, Elizabeth, go ahead.
Oh, yeah, I was just gonna say, in the survey results, one of the comments we had, one of the needs for services was for translation and interpretation resources, as well as public facing outreach materials. And at CROG, we are in the habit of producing our flyers and outreach materials in Polish and Spanish, are the two languages that are most common in our region. So that's what we
That's great, and I think that's a good point to make. Some of those community services. I loved, India, how you said even you get your building department involved, and you're really thinking about some of these complaints that are coming in and thinking about the solution very holistically. So I really appreciate that. I want to make sure we save a little bit of time for questions from our audience. So I'm just going to turn it over to Yamila and Alyssa Romero, who is hopefully still with
I'm
us.
still
There
here.
she is. Yes, okay, you're not on
Yes.
my screen. So I just want to introduce Alyssa is the consultant that's working with the Fair Rent Commission Network, and I know Yamila's gonna give us a little bit of an introduction, and then Alyssa is gonna give us even more information and talk about how to join. So I'm gonna give you all a couple minutes before we turn it over to the audience for questions.
Amazing. So, my name is Yamila Mateo. I have the honor to be the vice chair for the Fair Rent Commission Network. And alongside India Rogers, our other board member, our beautiful secretary. And we have Treasurer Jarrell. And you will see all of our board of directors with Elise Bermudez from New Haven and Demetria Nelson. I know she's on here as well. She is our wonderful chair for education subcommittee. So for context, the statewide Fair Rent Commission Network was formed in 2024 as a resource for fair rent commissions across the state of Connecticut. The network is a group of municipal staff and fair rent commissioners as well. And I think the biggest thing before I pass it on to Alyssa is we've tripled in size. Currently, we have about 35 municipalities and we continue to grow. Okay. So if you're interested, please reach out to Alyssa. She's going to share more ways how to get involved. But one of the biggest highlights is we are not just there as a network or just as a name, but we really are there to equip and to be a resource. So please feel free to reach out to myself, but I will pass it on to our wonderful consultant, Alyssa Romero. She's created this one pager, and I just want to say publicly, you've just done an amazing job at creating space for our cities and towns. So thank you. On to you.
Thank you. I appreciate that genuinely. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm so happy to be here with you all today. Yes, my name is Alyssa. I'm the consultant for the statewide Fair Rent Commissions Network. We have this one pager here that'll we could also distribute, but that is my PowerPoint. It will summarize what I have to say. But while the concept of fair rent commissions in the state of Connecticut are not entirely new, the legislature has been, thank God, increasing its support for commissions, especially with the recent passing of 8002 in both the House and the Senate. Our network currently represents 35 plus municipalities. We're still trying to get out there. We're growing different kinds of outreach techniques from social media to, hey, I'm in your inbox, come to our meeting. We're continuing to grow because the more we share, the stronger the network is, the stronger support services are for people across the state. Within our network, we create an access point for renters or tenants to mediate their disputes in issues such as unsafe, unhealthy housing conditions, harsh rent increases, or just if you're on the landlord side, unpaid rent. Where's my tenant? Anyone can reach out to the network. My email is on screen there, and I believe it's on the chat, so you can reach out to me if you need help discovering resources about fair rent commissions in your individual municipality, or just have any general questions. Very much happy to answer and respond to those. For municipal employees, we share resources such as trainings and access to our housing attorneys. We really like to build the network and educate and share, because once we share those resources, we are in turn bettering the state. We very, very graciously receive support from the State Department of Housing and our lovely host, the Partnership for Strong Communities, which has empowered us to expand our membership, host mediation trainings. We just had one. Great attendance, great turnout. It was honestly something that was needed, especially for municipalities that don't have a mediation process. And we also just really get to engage with the legislature. We're keeping tabs on policy. I stayed up until 1 a.m. watching that Senate debate. Don't you worry. But that's pretty much the network, and I could not be more grateful for our board of directors. Yamila, India, you guys are great. If anybody has any questions, feel free to reach out. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alyssa. And I know that one pager has some of the membership requirements that the network is looking to establish, and it starts off with meeting with Alyssa and kind of talking through probably the status of your Fair Rent Commission, and then having your commission as a board as a whole voting to become a part of the network. And I go to those meetings myself most of the time, and it's just really useful to kind of have that camaraderie and see how the small towns are doing it, the big towns are doing it. An exciting part and kind of next steps in the Fair Rent Commission is starting to gather some of this data that some people mentioned here today. Who are the landlords? Who are the tenants that need these supports? How much are we seeing rents go up? Who has a strong complaint process on their website? Are there other supports that tenants may need when they're going through this process that need to come from municipal social services or other departments? So we're working with the Connecticut Data Collaborative on that. And hopefully next year, when you come back to our Affordable Housing Conference next year, we will be sharing our first year of data with the Fair Rent Commission Network. And we'll be talking about the regional Fair Rent Commissions that are all coming together, because there's a lot of really great work that's kind of sitting right on the horizon. I want to turn to our chat. Let me see here. Let's see, any questions? Does anyone know if the WestCog is considering a regional fair rent commission? It sounds like that would make sense for Weston. Maybe that's a question for you, Elizabeth, though it's out of your region.
Yeah, I wouldn't be comfortable saying yes or no to that. I had thought that Krog was one of the first to really be having this conversation, but
Okay, not sure, more to come, but I think especially again with this legislation that was passed just last week, I would imagine that all of the cogs are probably thinking about, what role they can play in supporting the municipalities within their region.
The Amy has always allowed towns to
Mhm.
create a, kind of cooperative fair rent commission. That was some
Mhm.
conversations we had sometime last year about communities like Sprague or Baltic that are seeing the same, these older mill houses have seen the same sort of private equity investment and displacement. But it's a very small community, right? There's probably
Right,
5 people in town hall full time.
right, right.
But right adjoining there is Norwich. So was there an opportunity to partner with a community, a small community adjacent to a larger one? So you don't lose that feeling of connection to community and the ability to resource issues and the like. So that ability's been out there, and maybe we'll see more of that. And maybe the cogs will show these communities how a commission like this can work, and we'll see smaller fair rent commissions.
yeah, and
And that makes a lot of sense. Go ahead.
I'd be interested too when the data, the landlords, if they're just in one town or if sometimes they're in multiple towns, right? So there's a potential to, just because one town has a fair rent commission doesn't mean that some behavior should continue in the next town over.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
I think that'll be, an exciting new benefit of the regional aspect is we'll be able to maybe identify trends quicker and see, kind of increasing that tool belt of options around tenant stability as we kind of are able to track it a little bit quicker. I see we're coming up on time, and I just really wanted to say thank you so much to all of our presenters. It seems like this could certainly be a conversation that's to be continued. So Yamila, Beth, Alyssa, India, Elizabeth, thank you all so much for your time. Thank you to all of our participants for being here. Appreciate the conversation in the chat. We've got one more session in our affordable housing conference today, and then I really hope that some of you will be joining us at the reception honoring our housing ambassadors tonight. There are some great prizes to be bid on as part of our fundraiser auction, and would love, I was checking those out too. I got to make some time to get my bid in before it's too late. But thank you all again so much for your participation, and hope to see you in another session this afternoon. Have a great afternoon.